diagnostics are vital to a deworming program protocol. We also want to make sure that we're using the correct protocol. So in that regard, if you do a test, seeing if your product is working correctly like you think it has in the past, or if you need to move to a different product. And then the other reason to do diagnostics in a deworming protocol is just to make sure we're not coming up with any resistance as far as the parasites go. So when you look at the deworming diagnostics, there's a few different tests we can do. The most basic one is called a fecal egg count. It's where we just take a manure sample. They run any number of different variations of tests on that, but the end of the day is they end up with a fecal egg count. So they can count the number of eggs per gram of feces. That's the basic test for diagnostics and deworming. Go a step further, they can take those egg samples and do what we call a coproculture, where they actually grow up those eggs, hatch those eggs, and they can speciate out what types of worms are actually in those, which is very vital because a lot of those worm eggs actually look very similar. So that gives us a better idea of what species of worms we're actually dealing with. And then the third part of diagnostics is actually what we call a fecal egg count reduction test, or a fecer. And so that's doing a fecal egg count prior to treatment, treat the animal, and a specified amount of days later, we do another fecal egg count to see how effective that product has actually been. We part with doing the coproculture and actually figuring out the species of worms that we're dealing with that will let us know what the optimal product is to actually use to deworm those cattle, because different products have different strengths with different worms. And so if we know what kind of species of worms we're dealing with, then we can figure out the correct product and the correct timing that we can actually use to deworm those cattle. When we're doing the diagnostics for deworming, it's always important to include your local veterinarian. They have the expertise, the different types of worms, different type of products, and what may or may not be prevalent in your area. So they're definitely vital to include in the decision-making process.